Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Jamie Malarkey of Complaining and Snarky, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast. We're coming at you following UFC 301. Nobody was talking about this beforehand. Nobody was interested in it, but it turned out all right. Pantoja headliner. I mean, you know, that's why people weren't talking about it beforehand. They roped in Aldo at the last minute to try and save the card on Brazilian soil. And do you know what? It turned out pretty well. This episode is probably going to be a lot of praising Jose Aldo, a little bit of Pantoja versus Erceg, and then some, isn't everything above 170 pounds silly thrown in. So all your favourites, really. We're just hitting all the greatest hits. No feel-good story from Combat Sports this week, because I think this card was all right, and I didn't actually watch anything else yet. I know Canelo beat Mungia, or whatever his name was. And we got Inoue versus Neri on Monday, May Day. But aside from that, not a lot going on. So, co-main event, Jose Aldo, Jonathan Martinez, banger. Jose Aldo, older than ever, but aren't we all? 37 years old, looking like a bloody walnut out there. Wrinkles on his bald head. Fights Jonathan Martinez, tricky young up-and-comer. I always say on this podcast, whenever Jonathan Martinez comes up, or whenever we're talking about fighters that a young fighter should look at, or Jonathan Martinez does everything well. Starting to gain a bit of aura, because he stopped a couple of guys with low kicks, Cub Swanson and Adrian Yanez. I said, that'll be interesting, seeing how he deals without the low kicks, if Jose Aldo starts checking them. And he didn't deal very well at all. He had that thing where at the end of the fight ended with him in closed guard bottom. Aldo got off him and he rolled over and slammed his fists on the floor, and he looked very upset. And it was the exact same look on the face of Pedro Munoz when he was the up-and-coming hot stuff at bantamweight, and he met Jose Aldo, and he couldn't do anything. And afterwards, he went over to Aldo, and he was like, "You're the greatest, man." And, I think the interesting thing for me here is that Jose Aldo, the checking of kicks was something that I was really intrigued by. I joked about it beforehand, saying, like, what happens when Martinez throws the kick as hard as he can to the inside of Jose Aldo's lead leg, and Aldo checks. Does his shin smash into a million little pieces? There was always the possibility of that happening, but I never thought that Martinez was the kind of dummy to go out there and just throw full power kicks all the time against a guy who has proven himself one of the best kick checkers in MMA. But what does he do when he can't kick as often and doesn't get those devastating results off each kick? Because if he's not kicking as hard, when he does land, it's not going to mean as much. And it was a little bit similar to what you saw from Chris Gutierrez, his teammate, when he pooped the bed against Song Yadong, and he just couldn't throw a hard kick. And that was due to the fear of being countered, because Song Yadong steps down the inside of people very well. There's a number of knockdowns and a couple of knockouts he's had in the UFC where he's taken the low kick, stepped in on it, and thrown the left hook and hit the guy on one leg and knocked him out. Or knocked him down and followed up. So Gutierrez without low kicks was kind of unimpressive, and Martinez without low kicks was also kind of unimpressive. Lots of stuff I want to talk about with Aldo from this fight, but he wasn't checking the kicks off the bat. Martinez was catching him early. And he was doing very well with a little step-up outside low kick, and then throwing the inside low kick, because you've got to turn your shin to angle into the kick. And these are kicks above the knee, by the way. We're not talking about calf kicks right now, but you've got to turn your shin out into the kick to take the kick. You don't want to be... Like, if you pick your leg up to check an inside kick and they throw an outside kick, you're going to get hit in the calf anyway, where we don't want to get hit nowadays in MMA. Great example would be from Muay Thai, or, 4-ounce Muay Thai, so nerds will get mad about it, but Nongo fought Liam Harrison. Both guys with hundreds of fights of experience in Muay Thai. Liam Harrison knows how to check a kick. And Nongo fakes the kick, steps out to the right. Liam Harrison's picked his leg up to check, and Nongo throws the kick from slightly off to his right. So the kick wraps around behind and hits Harrison in the calf, basically, while he's on one leg. So you don't want to be taking ones like that. And by going inside and out, switching those playing those two kicks off each other, Martinez could have Aldo trying to play catch-up. And it was quite similar to what Gutierrez does. He uses a teep to the lead leg and an inside low kick with his rear leg. So I think he's southpaw. Maybe he's orthodox. But yeah, he has power kick with his rear leg, teep to the lead leg, and that gets the guy... keeps the guy guessing. So early going, Aldo can't check any of these kicks, and you want to check kicks because if you check kicks, if you checked a kick and then the guy went back to kicking as hard as possible all the time, you would miss a couple of kicks and you'd get hurt. But that's not how fighting works. As soon as you start checking hard kicks from the opponent, they ease up on those kicks or they stop throwing them as much because they don't want to hurt themselves. So Aldo wants this guy to kick his shin, or he wants to jam his shin into the path of the kick, rather. So midway through that first round, Jose Aldo throws a hard right high kick onto Martinez's arm, and wouldn't you know it, Martinez goes, "Oh, no, I'm not having that," and comes back with a low kick, and he gets teeped in the standing leg while on one leg and falls over. And then Jose Aldo throws a right kick to the inside of Martinez's lead right leg, and Martinez comes back with his own inside low kick because that's his move, and Aldo checks it. And then for the rest of the fight, Martinez is a lot less dangerous with those kicks. And that wasn't Aldo making a fantastic read. That was Aldo going out and kicking that guy to get kicks back. And it works so well. It works so well. I mean, if you watch any stadium Muay Thai or anything like that, or someone like Sanshai, someone like him. There's no one like him. But if you watch someone who likes catching kicks and throwing people off those kicks, like Sanshai, what he does first is he kicks. He kicks you so that you kick back. Very simple psychology, but also, it's the sensible thing to do in many regards, because if they're kicking you and they land on your arm, they're in kicking range. You know they're in kicking range. Just as if they punch you and they land on your lead shoulder or your guard, you know that they're in punching range. So that was how Aldo got those early checks in, started dissuading or deterring Martinez from throwing the powerful low kicks. And then it started to get more boxy, and Jose Aldo's been working on his boxing lots, obviously, because he took, I think it's 3 boxing matches since leaving the UFC. And there was talk about, the UFC not being happy with that and him trying to get out of his contract by fighting out his contract here. I don't know about that. Jonathan Martinez before the fight was saying Aldo's heart isn't in it and whatever. And obviously Aldo looked like trash on the scales because he always does. And then he fights, just like usual Aldo. But I don't know what's going on with Aldo's contract and his boxing and stuff. I think the case is probably, and this is just a guess, but the fight was put together fairly surprisingly. So I would guess that they didn't have a decent enough headliner for UFC 301 in Rio de Janeiro. So they wanted another big Brazilian on the card. There aren't really that many big Brazilians. I mean, they've done their best with Michel Pereira's coming up, Caio Borralho's coming up, but Jose Aldo's the man, so they stuck him on the card, and they probably offered him a load of money to do it. You would think if they're comfortably letting him box, they would have to offer him a bit more than usual to come back and do this. But whatever his reasons, he's been boxing recently. Only 6-rounders. If he were doing full 8-rounders, 10-rounders, that would be very interesting because his cardio has always been a bit of a problem, and his output has always, through even his prime when he was an absolute specimen athletically, his output has always been a bit on the low side. But the interesting thing about the boxing is that you have to throw punches through the full 6 rounds. There's no taking a break. I mean, he did it in this fight. When he got tired in the third, he just hit a double leg and laid on top. But there's no taking a break in boxing. You have to keep throwing hands for 6 full rounds or 8 full rounds or 10 full rounds, whatever you're signed for. And I was quite intrigued to see how that affected his performance here. I will say I was really impressed by his volume. And, I wax lyrical about Jose Aldo a lot, but Aldo as an old man has impressed me much more than Aldo in his prime. In his prime, before he fought Frankie Edgar the first time, he didn't even really have a jab. And then he just developed one of the best jabs in the sport. And that was the case with Jose Aldo. He kept adding things, and he fell in love with boxing, and it meant that he moved away from his low kicks and his knees. The knees were back for this one. Loved them. But he's kind of got going on what Fedor had going on, where he fell in love with boxing, and that's what kept him motivated to keep training for MMA. And with Fedor, obviously, it worked out quite badly, jumping into triangles, not looking that good on the mat, not looking that good in the clinch anymore. But with Aldo, I'm genuinely impressed by some of the stuff that's happened. And what really impressed me in this fight, having not watched his boxing matches, which people tell me he didn't look great in, but what really impressed me in this fight was how he was moving with his punches. Because Jose Aldo, if you think back to Jose Aldo's fights, there's been lots of occasions where he covers or slips or whatever the opponent's attack, and he throws back with big counters. Right straight, left hook to the body, right hook to the body, left hook to the body, those ones. Think of his big body shots and things like that they always show in slow-mo after the fights. a lot of those punches, he's sort of falling forward onto his lead foot for, and then his head's over his lead foot. He doesn't really have anywhere to go. He can't really like follow the guy. He can't really move across the floor without like exposing himself. And even like obviously the Conor McGregor example is a great one where he squares up and leaps forward with the left hook, and everything's like ahead of his feet. But even like the Pedro Munoz fight, the Marlon Vera fight, go back and watch his body shots, how he throws himself onto the lead leg and he really leans forward and he's punching the guy and he's sort of like falling downwards all the time, falling downwards and forwards. In this fight, I was really impressed by how he always took his feet with him and he was always on top of his feet. So from the early going, he's throwing, he's fighting a southpaw, so he's trying to throw like the left hook behind the lead hand and make ground because the guy's going to back off. Martinez is going to kick and back off all the time. So he's throwing like left hook and he's bouncing his feet up at the same time, and then right straight, left hook, right straight. I mean, he's throwing 4 punch combinations to the head, not like banging the body 3 times as the guy stands still in place. He's throwing 4 punches and moving across the floor, and he's not leaning ahead of himself. And that really impressed me. That's a massive improvement in boxing form. Or when he threw his right straight at Martinez's body. He threw it and his feet both moved towards Martinez and he changed level a bit. He didn't step forward with his right foot. He didn't step forward with his left foot, fall onto it, throw a right straight while his body's like angled forward, his head 2 feet in front of his hips, and then try and come up or step back. He was on top of his feet the whole time. It really impressed me and it really bothered Martinez. And I think I was trying to think of other like southpaws that Aldo's fought recently. Certainly like striking southpaws. Dvalishvili's orthodox, Font is orthodox, Munoz is orthodox, Marlon Vera switches and doesn't really do anything, Jan is orthodox, Moraes is orthodox, Volkanovski switches but is mainly orthodox, Moicano is orthodox, Jeremy Stevens I believe is orthodox, Max Holloway switches, Frankie Edgar's orthodox, Conor McGregor. And there we are back at the one big southpaw where he lunged ahead of himself. And it's quite easy to do against southpaws to start reaching ahead of yourself, especially if you're leading with the right hand, or you're throwing the right hand out as a fake to square up and throw the left hook afterwards. This one was a great... this fight, in some regards, obviously not the same fighter at all, but because of the rangy southpaw who moves back, and certainly kicks and moves back and tries to draw you forward, or just get away, this was sort of like correcting some errors. So I really enjoyed that. He brought back the knees, which honestly... great to see as an old school Aldo head, because he won the WEC belt back in like 2008 with knees. That's what he was known for. That was before the low kick, even. The low kick's like Uriah Faber time. But I'd honestly say the knees in this fight were some of the shots that got him caught. Because he had to get up on one leg, he threw the knee, and he often didn't connect with Martinez's head. And Martinez would come back with punches and catch him on one leg or coming down from one leg. Martinez had a couple of moments. A couple of times he landed his left straight to back Aldo up a little bit, and then he landed his left body kick underneath Aldo's elbow. And I think it was in the second round that Aldo then circled past Martinez's lead leg, and Martinez threw the back fist and just sort of like grazed Aldo's chin. Honestly, the back fist was probably a good shout and something they probably worked for, because Aldo loves to slip off to the left and then pivot around his left foot. You would expect him to do that even more against the southpaw every time they come in. So letting him go out of the left side and then hitting him with the back fist on the way out the door, good shout. Think of Kyoji Horiguchi getting knocked out by Sergio Pettis. I often do before I go to sleep, and I have a little weep. But I wanted to praise the volume and the work rate and the moving his feet with it and staying on balance. I thought that was beautiful. The distance he was covering, because he also showed a little bit of the old Aldo stuff, which was like the Rob Font performance. If in doubt, just crack him, because he threw an uppercut left hook, dinged Martinez and wobbled him up. And then in the third, he'd wobbled Martinez and he runs up on him like he's about to start swinging. And clearly it's third round and Aldo's actually getting a bit tired. So he bends over at the waist, grabs Martinez, locked hands under the button, just throws him to the mat. It was the most Big Brother-esque takedown you've ever seen. But then he digs his knees in to get to full guard or to closed guard. And he goes, right, you're not getting up now and you're not going to hurt me from here and you're never submitting me. And you could see Martinez getting really frustrated, and then when the bell went, he was just like, fuck, I've blown it. Got to be a very frustrating. I mean, you see it a lot in fights, but guys who are losing on the cards and then they get taken down in the third round and they just can't get back up, and you get that like last minute or two where they're going, well, what can I get going from my back? I'm not going to submit this person. I'm not going to, I'm not going to be able to push a triangle through if they're just keeping their elbows in and hands in my biceps and then hitting me with short elbows. But a great performance from Aldo. He's slowing down physically, and some of the shots that I saw him take in this one sort of gave him a pause in the way that he just would have walked through in his youth. But he is so much a better fighter now in terms of skill than he was during his prime. They always say like, oh, as an older fighter, you're losing your physical edge, so you've got to develop these. You've got to develop the technique and the strategies and the tactics. And Aldo, more than anyone, represents that. And this is a sport where that can be, that can carry you for a very long time. Anderson Silva was out of his physical prime long before what we would consider like his best years in the UFC. His physical prime was like his Pride run and Cage Rage, and then he just gets better and better technically and starts coming up with better plans, fighting on the back foot, drawing people forward. That was all later era Silva. Had he been doing it back in Pride, well, they probably wouldn't have signed him to too many fights. I don't know if they'd have liked it. But, this is a sport where athleticism is still a massive part of it. But you have so many approaches. And so much of it is misdirection and tactics. And, of course, the addition of the knockout and the submission mean that you only have to outsmart the guy once if you get it right. Because if we were playing five-a-side football or five-a-side basketball or whatever, and you hit your trick play and you get a point, and then you just get stomped for the rest of the game. If you do that trick play and you score your point in MMA, you might just finish the fight and not have to deal with this person again. Come up with a trick play for the next time you have to fight them. So main event, Steve Erceg gets his title shot way early. Very few people get their title shot that soon. I mean, it's an interesting comparison with Pantoja, who was a force in the division for years and years and years. Joined the UFC in 2017. Finally put together that 3-fight winning streak with an astonishing stoppage of Alex Perez, where he just came out swinging, being like, this is my shot. Which I suppose takes us back to the heartbreak of Martinez, because if you're in a division that deep, Martinez was on a 6-fight winning streak, including Adrian Yanez, Said Nurmagomedov, two of the guys who are very much seen as up-and-comers. Basically now everyone forgets who he is, because that's his momentum gone. So Steve Erceg getting this title fight this early, very surprising, but not really, it makes sense when you have a look at the layout of the division. We talked about this, like people were saying, oh, Makayev deserves the title shot. Do you think they want to do Makayev in a title shot in this event they've rushed together for Brazil, or do you think they want to do Makayev in a title shot at one of their Abu Dhabi events, or now we've got Saudi Arabia events as well? So, that's how the UFC operates. Muslim fighter, get on the Abu Dhabi card. Like, literally no matter where you're from. So I imagine Makayev gets his title shot on a Abu Dhabi card sometime later this year. But Erceg was coming off the win over Matt Schnell. Fantastic knockout, but then Matt Schnell is like a very knockout-prone fighter. 5 knockout losses, all in the UFC. Bro gets knocked out a fair amount. In a division where nobody's getting knocked out, Matt Schnell says, let me make up those numbers. But it was impressive. It was a great left hook. He's a very slick striker. Hasn't got a heap of knockouts on his record, but has looked great if you actually watch the fights. There was a load of stuff from the pre-fight preview on the Boycast that came up here. I said, Alexandre Pantoja, if you don't want to get chinned by a left hook, throw that right hand and just grab the head. And he did that a few times. If you saw the massive cut that was opened up on Steve Erceg's forehead, that was a jab overhand into a head grab, into double collar tie, or collar ties over the arm even, and a knee up the middle. And Pantoja's always done a bit of that. He did that against Moreno. He even did it against Royval, so he does it against taller opponents because, Erceg's like half a foot taller than him as well. Overhand into head grab. Fantastic technique. Takes you out of boxing. If you throw the overhand and then you're just standing there, whether you're throwing the left hand afterwards, whether you're trying to do something defensive, you're still boxing with the guy. If you throw the overhand and you grab his head and pull him in, you're not really boxing him anymore. I said Pantoja's left hand hangs at his waist at almost all times. His left hand's job is to jab and then drop to his waist while he's throwing multiple right hands. And he did that in the first round, and you saw Erceg just step round him, pivoted around him, threw a right straight left hook, I think a right high kick off the end. But there were a lot of occasions in this fight where Erceg was trying to circle just towards the left side, or Pantoja's left side, out of exchanges, because Pantoja doesn't really have a weapon on that side. He occasionally throws like right hook to the body, left hook to the body, right hook to the body. He throws flurries of body shots, and I'm sure he can throw a left hand, but it's like when you watch him, nothing is set up for him to economically throw a left hand. I'm sure if you get him on the bag and you say throw some left hooks, he'll be great, but he does not throw them well in fights, and he's never in position to throw them in fights. So lots of jab overhand and jab overhand right calf kick from at Pantoja, and that's his game on the feet. But he does it aggressively, and he crashes into clinches so effectively that it can stop people from counterpunching. Now, Erceg, on the other hand, I said throw some elbows because you've got a guy who's going to try and crash into you constantly. I'm saying crash into. I don't think I said that on the Boydcast, but it was a phrase that came up like a billion times on the broadcast last night because Martinez's coach was shouting it. And then in the main event, all the commentators were saying, oh, yeah, he's just trying to crash in. And you're like, did you just get that in your brain from the corner in the previous fight? But Pantoja is always trying to close the distance on you and overwhelm you. And guys like that, as we saw, a great example would be Corey Sandhagen versus Song Yadong. If you've got a guy like that who's just rock hard and you're not going to, especially if they're like pressing up on you all the time, it's very hard to get that good right straight and get that good left hook in without messing up your distance. You're trying to hit a fastball coming at you. Whereas if you jam an elbow in their face, they're basically running onto it and they're going to do most of the damage for you. So Pantoja got opened up with elbows really early on this one. Erceg was landing the right elbow constantly because Pantoja goes jab, drop the left hand to throw the overhand, and that's when the counter elbow was just folding over and hitting him constantly in this fight. Pantoja's takedown game is still one of the coolest and pretty unique in MMA, to be honest. He gets the body lock, hands locked around the opponent's waist. He steps inside between their legs and he turns and that pulls the opponent's hips over his thigh and butt in what's called a power twist in wrestling. You'll see that constantly along the fence. Arman Tsarukyan did it the other day to Charles Oliveira. It's like the go-to takedown. But he did it out in the open against Erceg, and he stepped in deep to start the power twist, and he brought his other foot up and swept the foot or blocked the foot as Erceg was trying to hop round. Beautiful stuff. Landed on top. He was attempting this, and Erceg would step past him, and he'd start trying to sit down on the crab ride, which is another feature of Pantoja's game. If you watch him along the fence, he gets behind people in the back body lock, and then he threatens to pick him up, sort of wedges himself between them and the fence, and then just sits down with them in his lap, with his shoelaces behind their knees. And that's like pure gi jiu-jitsu, that stuff. That's all the crab ride. If you watch back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, the Meow brothers were coming up and doing tons of that. They were so good at the crab ride. And the crab ride's great because you can either, if you've got your hands locked around them and you've got your butterfly hooks basically in the back of their knees, you can start pulling yourself onto their back and them over the top of you, as when Erceg was trying to sit on his chest because Pantoja would just push him down and try and get him on the mat. The end of the Filthy Casuals guide to Pantoja and the knee reap, I put in a clip of him doing an awesome inversion through the legs of Askar Askarov and ending up in exactly this position in the crab ride. But you can also come up on the leg drag, which is a kind of pass. So with the Meows and with Pantoja now, it was always this threat, this thing between I'm going to pull you on top of me with my back to the floor and get your back, or I'm going to push you off me and come up behind your legs in the leg drag, already passed. If you watch his first fight with Brandon Royval, it's just constant leg drag, back take, leg drag, back take. And because he can do it from anywhere he gets behind the opponent, so he did it. He attempted it when Erceg stepped around him when he was trying the power twist. He just tried to sit down with his feet in position to do the crab ride. Because he can do it from any position like that, it makes the fence wrestling very interesting. If you watched Onama versus Pierce the other day, which people remember for the Max Holloway stuff at the end, which I really hope I kind of hope that dies out soon, because if you do it in every fight, or there's one on every card, it's like, what's the point of this? It's kind of like when Conor McGregor put his hands behind his back for about a year. Everyone was doing it, and it was really stupid. And they'd always do it by backing out to a distance where the guy couldn't hit them anyway. And you're I'm not really impressed by that. But yes, if you watched Pierce versus Onama, Onama would be pressed to the fence by Pierce on like a double leg or a single leg. Pierce's head is low, and he's trying to get the leg. He's trying to scoop up the legs. Onama would have his legs wide in that sort of runner's stance, they call it, with his feet pressed to the fence and his knees pressed to the fence. And he would switch so that his legs were the wrong way around, which is something that you'll see occasionally. It's very difficult. Conor McGregor did it against Nate Diaz. Who have I seen? I think Dominic Cruz does it, but it's been forever since he fought. But guys do it a little amount. It's a cool way of like being able to run out the side door when you separate their hands. But Onama did it and didn't have an overhook. So basically when he did it, he showed Jonathan Pierce the backside of his stance, and Jonathan Pierce just pulled him back and sat down and tried to crab ride him. It's really interesting because it's a jiu-jitsu position in the context, in the way that people use it now, but it comes from like old wrestling. 50s, 60s crab rides were huge in amateur wrestling, and in American folk style, like it was crab rides and elevators. If you listen to interviews with guys like Wade Chalez and John Smith, they talk about how at the elevators, butterfly hooks used to be way more common in their day when they were coming up through school. I'm going to have one of those weird catch wrestling dudes just having a wank along to this episode going, yeah, tell him how Catch invented it. Because catch wrestlers are, well, mainly people who are online too much, and they just cannot, they're like, I think you'll find that's it's a screw choke from catch wrestling, not a Darce choke. When Craig Jones toe-holded Boogie Martinez under his own leg in a way that you don't ever see done, basically the only submission I know of in competition, aside, there's probably one in like a low-level grappling competition somewhere, but to do that was really remarkable. And the response from one guy was, I guess you all have never rolled with any catch wrestlers. It's like, no, because they're a mythical breed. But yeah, crab rides. They're awesome. Also nerding out about grappling stuff, there were 2 giggler sweeps by Erceg in this fight. He didn't sweep with them. He was able to get his way to better positions. I think he got up off one. But in the first round, he hits one, and in the last round, he hits one. And the giggler sweep is something I'm always raving about on this podcast. It's from half guard. It's tilting the guy over your free leg. Go watch Mansour Barnui. He does it all the time. Like Barnui, Erceg hits it from a position where it's a bit more difficult. The ideal time to do the giggler sweep is when you're in a... Ryan Hall calls it the shell guard. I've heard it called like a 3/4 guard. But if you're in half guard with a knee shield, so one of your legs is between the opponent's legs, one of your legs is like knee in front of their chest to keep them off you. You free your bottom leg up to the knee, so your knee comes in front of their pelvis, basically. You rest it on the hip that your body's sort of pointing towards. Then when they try and push in, you keep a hold of their posting arm and you use your bottom leg as a lever to lever their hips over their shin. If they're on top, like if your bottom knee is deep, so in a half guard as opposed to a cool knee shield with basically both knees free, it's a lot harder to do. And those are the kind that Erceg hit here. He was being flattened out and he used it. But those are the kind that you use most often in sort of like, oh, I've got to get out of this position and get something back. You use it to reset and try and get back to a better guard. To use it as a sweep, it's much better to have your knee in front of them, in front of their body. So go watch those 2 instances in this fight, and you'll notice Erceg's bottom leg, the one that's between Pantoja's leg, is deeper than the knee between his hips. If his knee was in front of Pantoja, he'd have a bit more oomph on the sweep. But, you're playing the position as you're given. When you're dealing with someone like Pantoja, who's just a smothering guard passer, so good from top half guard, just cutting through to mount and side control. But yeah, this was one where we were given another view of 4th round Pantoja, my favourite mythical fighter. 4th round Pantoja is always gassed as hell, and he's getting beaten up, and he's like, oh, you wait until I've had a little sit down, mate. You're going to get it. And then he comes out for 5th round, and he actually does come out like that. It's really impressive that he sucks it up and he goes, right, it's 5th round, I'm going mental. And he did it to Royval, and he did it here again against Erceg. Now, Erceg did not do himself any favours by attempting some takedowns that he maybe shouldn't have. First one was a decent attempt. I'm trying to remember how Pantoja got up out of that, but it was pretty cool. He hoofed him in the nuts. He was underneath Erceg, standing over him, and he put his heel in underneath Erceg's cup, which is, of course... If you remember Roberto Duran versus Ken Buchanan, that was always like, oh, well, if you hit from under the cup, you're not protected. They're not protected. But he heels him from underneath the cup. And as Erceg's going, oh, come on, mate, and complaining, Erceg is standing upright. So Pantoja just sits up on the single leg. Very cool. And then Erceg attempted to take down late in the round, and Pantoja rolled through on a leg, rolled through on a knee bar attempt under the arm, ended up coming up on top. Very cool stuff. Pantoja is always great for... I think he hits a nice middle ground because he's got enough wild stuff happening for the Philistine, the MMA Philistine. And you've got... who's this Philistine I keep hearing about? You've got cool techers happening for nerds who like flyweight fights to begin with. Oh, I've just retweeted someone. This might be a bit bullying, but I just retweeted someone who was like, oh no, clearly Martinez wasn't there. He threw like 4 kicks, man. And it's like, yeah, bro, that's what checking does. People throw less kicks if you can check, or if you demonstrate that you can check. It's like, why didn't he throw more punches in a boxing match? Well, because he was getting punched a lot, you know. Oh, actually, ruining the timestamps completely, but thought about the Aldo Martinez fight. Teep to the lead leg, teep to the lead thigh. We were talking about it the other day with Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje and how it breaks people off and it tires them out because it's like being interrupted all the time. It's like being part of the Thig Boy network. But Max Holloway was using a right teep into Justin Gaethje's left thigh because they're both orthodox. Jose Aldo was using a left teep into Martinez's right thigh because he's southpaw. So it was lead leg into lead leg. And the very first one he throws is like he throws a right high kick and he teeps the standing leg as Martinez comes back with his kick and knocks Martinez over. End of the first round, he picks it up to teep Martinez's lead leg. I think he like places it on his lead leg and Martinez then tries to push forward and he just straightens his leg and buckles his hips back. It's nicer than the oblique kick because you're not just smashing, you're not, everyone's scared of getting their knee inverted. It's not like Khalil Roundtree smashing that dude's knee. And in Muay Thai circles, they'll much prefer you kick they don't mind you teeping the thigh, but they will get mad if you teep the knee. But the effect is largely the same in terms of like breaking the guy's balance and tiring him out, or breaking the guy's posture as he comes forward to attack. Great example of this in action is Pech Morakot, which I know you're going to have a horrible time spelling. Petchmorakot, I believe, versus Kaito, Kaito. The first fight they had in shoot boxing, I've not seen the second yet because they take so long to put them up. But the first one, I was watching it the other day, having not watched it for months after it happened. But Pech Morakot does this beautiful thing where he's bouncing from foot to foot. He's got that lovely rhythm, lead foot, rear foot, lead foot, rear foot. And when he goes onto his rear foot, I think he's fighting southpaw against Kaito, who's orthodox. But he's checking the lead hand, he's walking forwards and he's rocking backwards and forwards on his feet. And when he rocks onto his back leg, he picks up his lead leg and he teeps the thigh, and then he can come down punching afterwards. And when he rocks onto his lead leg, he'll throw the left high kick. It's a really beautiful performance and just a great show of that rhythm going from foot to foot. But he really does make great use of the teep to the lead leg, lead thigh. Massively undervalued technique because even the jab to the body, which is hugely undervalued, you'll occasionally see someone get dropped by it. You will never see, well, I mean, you do get people dropped by teeps to the leg, but it's like, oh, it happened when they were kicking or off balance or whatever. Let them get up and we'll completely ignore it. But the teep to the lead leg, thrown well, thrown at good times, very tiring. So what else was on this card? Anthony Smith versus Vitor Petrino. I mean, this one, we were talking about Petrino in the Tyson-Pedro fight, and I said he crowded him really well. He wasn't really checking the kicks. This one, he crowded Anthony Smith. He wasn't checking the kicks that well. He took a kick, he picked his leg up, he took it on the outside of the calf. Then he stepped in to swing an overhand, and you could see his leg, like, give a bit. And then he starts backing up. And we're always saying behavior changes. Look when a guy's behavior changes. Because he's either had like a bright idea and gone, oh, I'll try something different, or he's been hurt. And that's how you can spot like injured hands, injured shins from kicks and things. Or it's just people don't like things. Like if you watch someone like Nick Diaz get hit in the body and suddenly become not aggressive for the next 20 seconds, and then everyone just overlooks it. Like they don't realize that Nick Diaz hates being hit in the body, and Nate Diaz. And BJ Penn was another one. But Vitor Petrino here steps out for a big overhand, leg goes weird, steps back, as one more guy stepping forward with a combination along the fence against Anthony Smith, and his leg sort of, he ends up sidestepping awkwardly. So then he shoots a really bad takedown and gets guillotined. Another win for Anthony Smith and the calf kick against bad light heavyweights. Michel Pereira versus Ihor Potieria. This was very funny because I was like, I can't work out why they're putting 8-fight winning streak Michel Pereira versus 1-fight not looking terrible streak Ihor Potieria. And Ihor Potieria has been finished in 3 of his last 5 fights by strikes. But then it all became apparent because they got these guys ready to come out. And then they do Mauricio Shogunhua's Hall of Fame induction. And if you're Ihor Potieria, you've got to be thinking, oh no, I've been set up here, because if you remember, Potiera is basically famous for knocking out Shogun in his last fight. Shogun was so washed, and he was in front of a Brazilian crowd, and Potiera knocked him out and did this stupid Fortnite emote dance. And yeah, so Michel Pereira came out and did the deed for the Brazilian fans. But Potiera, he's doing like a step out outside low kick, inside low kick, gets caught on one leg with a big right hand, falls down. Michel Pereira executes a completely illegal flipping knee to the head. I've never seen one of these guard passes work without hitting the guy with an illegal knee to the head. They're so fucking stupid, but it's what he does. You know, he's started tightening up all the stuff on the feet and all the smart stuff, and he has to throw a little bit of stupid weirdness in for people. And then Potiera tries to wrestle up and he gets guillotined. And he tapped, and Pereira let go, and he went out on the way down. Like, he put his hand down and then he went, oh no, I'm out. Because that's the weird way the brain works without oxygenated blood in it. Was it a big win for Pereira? I don't know. Was it a big loss for Potiera? No, he's lost to much worse fighters in devastating fashion. Caio Borralho versus Paul Craig. We said it before, but a guy who can grapple to a good enough extent. Paul Craig's not taking him down. He was okay on the feet. Borralho's looked all right on the feet in the past. I liked his Contender Series performance the second time. I said he was quite Machida-like. Stood southpaw, let the guy walk onto him, tried to time him with straights up the middle. Did that to Paul Craig with the kicks. Paul Craig, man, it's difficult. It's difficult because I think he's working at a higher level now with my boy James Doolan. But they're trying to work on the kicks and frames and stuff, and he just can't defend his head well enough. He throws these kicks that are quite decent, but the guys inevitably step up the middle and hit him while he's on one leg. And then his wrestling isn't good enough, so he keeps doing this bullshit pulling guard. But then you're like, if you told him never to pull guard and just focused on getting the single leg and you did the Damian Maia stuff, I don't know if he's that good on top. Almost all of his success has come from being difficult on his back, which is to be, in MMA, that's to be good at winning from when you're losing. So your base point, your starting point for your game plan is to start losing and then win. He's a very interesting fighter, but it's very frustrating to watch because nothing seems to be getting that much better. And Borralho Borralho, Brendan Allen, anyone who's competent on the feet or on the ground or both is going to give him hell, provided they don't massively overcommit from a silly position. Joe Anderson Brito versus Jack Shaw. This was crazy. This was to the man with the hammer, everything's a nail. Throwing calf kick constantly along the fence. I think Jack Shaw was stuck because he was worried that Joe Anderson Brito was going to hip feint and come in swinging because Brito put him right on the fence. There wasn't really anywhere for him to retreat. So if he tried to deal with the calf kicks, he put himself at risk of getting hit with a combination on one leg. But he did start checking the kicks eventually, and that blew his shin open with a cut, which they then stopped the fight for, which was insane because it wasn't like he was bleeding so much that they were at risk of him bleeding out or passing out or even like significantly soaking the canvas to make it difficult for other fighters later in the night. The cut did nothing to stop him from fighting. He was not in danger. It wasn't blinding him. Really stupid stoppage, but really impressive performance from Joe Anderson Brito because not only was he lumping his leg up and landing some good punches, every time Shaw entered on a clinch, Brito would dig underhooks and turn him round. And Jack Shaw's whole thing has been jab and double leg, or jab and clinch and takedown, and he had nothing for Brito here. Rest of the card didn't impress me too much. Oh no, I liked Huffy, and I liked Oral Bai's performance. Do you know what? I'll talk about those on the Boycast. We got actually a pretty decent event coming up in St. Louis, aside from the Derek Lewis main event. Diego Ferreira versus Mateusz Rebecki, that's a banger. Alex Caceres versus Sean Woodson, that's weird. Chase Hooper versus Borshev, that's two guys who've got 99 in one skill and 40 in another. Terence McKinney against a guy with a slight pulse. Don't know how that's going to work out. Some good stuff on that card. So I'll be back then. Oh, and we got Lomachenko versus Kambosos. And we got Inoue versus Neri. Oh, and I'll talk about the Canelo fight. So yeah, loads to talk about on the Boycast. If you want to get in on that, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy, Jack Slack. Jose Aldo's longevity, bless.